Excellency, the floor is yours.
Faire taire les armes et
Silencing the guns and issues relating to peace and security in general actually are due to so many things. It's not like turning on a switch or switching it off, not on and off a switch. No, there are several factors that have to be taken into consideration, and that is the reason why the African continent and the African Union have been challenges to silence the guns. But we have to resolve our conflicts peacefully, and this is one of the principles of the African Union, just like the principle of non-interference. So this is an aspect that we all have to actually look at. When exactly do we talk about non-interference or non-indifference, and how do we use them to silence the guns? But that is the situation in which we find ourselves in. And if I am chosen by the heads of states and government as chairperson of the commission, I will make sure that the African Union Commission would actually work towards resolving our conflicts peacefully, because we have that in the Constitutive Act of Africa, of the African Union. So we have the Peace and Security Council, we have the Peace Architecture of the African Union, but we also have the United Nations Security Council. And then bilaterally, we've got efforts that are underway, and we've heard about progress in some areas, in some regions where we have long-standing conflicts. And then we also have the opportunity of ensuring that there is solidarity with the United Nations, the African Union and the United Nations. This is a framework that could actually enable us to sit down with the international community and talk about crisis in Africa. Why should we only talk about the crisis in Ukraine? Why not talk about the crisis in Sudan and crisis in other African countries? So we are talking about financing peace missions, but there is also a program that actually wants to see the program of the United Nations, that is the SDGs, aligned with Agenda 2063. And then we also have the 10-year plan of our public institutions in charge of working at a national level, but we are talking about the justice systems in our respective countries. Now, concerning the 2 permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council, I think here in Africa, we all know the importance and the urgency of having these 2 seats. And we have to seize this opportunity because we are actually at the end of 2024. And so we have to act very fast in 2025. And this should be the mantra of the African Union in 2025. And so, of course, we have to make sure that we can actually speak with one voice on the choice of who will represent Africa on the United Nations Security Council. It's not going to be easy. It will be up to the heads of states to decide who will be the continent's representative. And now we'll conclude to say that, like this morning, I read in the newspapers the problem between Ethiopia and Somalia, and this was being resolved by Turkey. The mediator is Turkey. Let us be responsible. Let us be serious. The African Union should be that person doing the mediation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, candidate from Madagascar. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our second round. And without any transition, we are going to step into the third round, and we are going to discover the question. Anita, you have the floor.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move into the third round. Once again, if you're just joining us, these questions have been formulated by an independent panel, and the questions will be open and seen only at the beginning of the round, as I'm doing right now. Esteemed candidates, on the topic of reviving Pan-Africanism and countering external influence, Pan-Africanism is declining, and external powers and internal divisions challenge Africa's integration efforts. What specific steps will you take to rekindle the spirit of Pan-Africanism, counter big power politics on the continent, mobilize African countries behind a common integration agenda, ensure resource self-reliance, and position regional economic communities at the center of this process.
Cher candidat,
Distinguished candidates, your question is as follows in French.
l'africanisme est en déclin et les puissances extérieures et les divisions internes remettent en cause les efforts d'intégration en Afrique. Quelles mesures spécifiques comptez-vous prendre pour raviver l'esprit du panafricanisme contre la politique des grandes puissances sur le continent, mobiliser les pays africains derrière un programme d'intégration commun, assurer l'autonomie en matière de ressources et positionner également les communautés économiques régionales au centre de ce processus? Et nous allons commencer tout de suite avec le candidat.
And we will start with the candidate of Djibouti to provide his answer. You have 4 minutes. First and foremost, we have to understand that we are living in a world which is multipolarized world. This is a world that is actually multipolarized, and this world would not provide space for a continent or countries that do not have the right economies, the military strength, the capacity that is required, and mostly that continent or country that is not on the world stage. This is a reality. So what can we do? What should we do? I think it is very important that the Global South should actually take action. And in the Global South, it is Africa that actually has to stand out. And how is Africa going to stand out? If we do not represent much in terms of global trade, you cannot actually sit around a table where decisions are being taken for the destiny of the world. And so integration is, I would say, an obligation, is a must. When we talk about obligation, it is important that the AFCFTA should actually be functional. It is important that intra-Africa trade be developed, and it should go beyond 18%. It is important that African countries should actually use their own resources. And so Africa has now a seat on the G20 table. We want to congratulate South Africa for chairing the G20 next year. And so it is important that the African Union Commission should be working hand in hand with the African Union to actually make sure that Agenda 2063 is a priority item on the agenda of Agenda 2063 of the G20. Africa has to be also on the UN Security Council. Just imagine 80% of the issues discussed at the UN Security Council is African problems. When we talk about security issues, who do we talk about? Africa. When we talk about food insecurity, we also hear Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia. They have actually been victims of natural disasters, but we are not the ones polluting the world. So the African Union should also be fully involved in the COP discussions. The COP discussions should also be held here in Africa. So a strong Africa has to be an Africa that is present on the global stage. We have to see that Africa has to be part and parcel of the Global South, and this is what we have to do. And I'm going to make sure that our commission is going to work to ensure that Africa is part of the Global South. Integration is a long-winded effort. It goes through solidarity. We are not working among ourselves. We are not speaking to one another as neighbors. Would rather trade with non-African countries because we have non-tariff barriers, because our currencies are not convertible. Our currencies are not convertible. If I want to trade in birr with Ethiopia, and Ethiopia wants to trade in francs, definitely there's some there is loss of money. So we should have a payment and compensation system in Africa. We have to mobilize resources between 5 and 10 billion